Okay, hello, hi everybody. Welcome to another live stream. So my name is Lara Ryan and I'm the founder of Complete Test Success. In today's live stream, we are focusing on academic IELTS writing task 1. So I have a graph that I'm going to share with you in a moment, and I'll get you guys to write the various parts of the essay. So what's going to happen is you will share your writing with me. I'll tell you what mistakes you're making, and then with those mistakes, that will help you understand how to improve your scores. So you basically avoid repeating those mistakes, or if you have weaknesses that you can improve on. And then as you guys are sharing your writing with me, I'll take some samples, add them to the screen, and use your work to construct an essay as we make our way through the lesson. So for those of you who don't know me, I've been an IELTS examiner for writing and for speaking. I've been teaching IELTS since 2010, and I have my own courses to give students one-on-one support and help them achieve success. I've helped hundreds and hundreds of students to achieve their IELTS scores. So if you need more hands-on support, please feel free to reach out, and I'll see if I can find a place for you. So let's get started on today's lesson. Here is the question. And obviously, step 1 is to look at the question carefully. The thing about task 1 is there are different pieces of information kind of scattered around the page or the screen, whether you're doing paper-based or computer-based. So you've got the question statement at the top. You've got the title. You've got the key. You've got the information along the y-axis, the x-axis and the y-axis, and then you've got labels for the x and y-axis. So basically, there's just lots of information scattered around. Kind of a common mistake that we see students make is they are in a rush. They feel they only have 20 minutes, so everything has to happen really, really quickly. So they don't read the question carefully enough, or they don't, look at all the different parts. They misunderstand the question in some way, and then they're getting a low score for task achievement because they're not the information in their essay isn't actually the information in the graph. They've misunderstood it. So you don't want to rush that stage. Once you finish looking at the question and you're comfortable that you're happy, you're satisfied that you understand it, the next step then is to go and write the paraphrase. So the paraphrase is the first sentence of your essay. With task 2, I strongly recommend that you write an essay plan first. But for task 1, there's no reason to write an essay plan. That's not necessary. So to write your paraphrase, you're basically taking the little bit of text which I've covered up here, this bit of text here at the top, and you rewrite that in your own words. So this one says, the graph below shows the average consumption of cheese per person in England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland between 1980 and 2020. So what we need to do is we need to rewrite that sentence using our own words. The reality is you probably won't be able to change every word. You'll need to copy some of the words, and that's okay. So just change the ones you can change. So for example, I like to just go like phrase by phrase. So if we take the first phrase, we go, okay, the graph. Do you know another way to say that? If you do, change it. If you don't, copy it. When you're finished, we don't need to copy the word below. We can ignore that. Paraphrase the word shows. Again, if you know another word with the same meaning, change it. If you don't, copy it. Then we go on to the average consumption. If you can change it, do. If you can't, copy it. So you just go like chunk by chunk like that. Make your way through the full paraphrase, through the full sentence. What I want you to do so is write the paraphrase, share it with me in the comments. The most important thing is your paraphrase has the same meaning as the original question statement and that it's clear. So like secondary to being clear and accurate would be being able to change the language. Hi, Dia. The line graph illustrates the average per capita consumption of cheese in 4 different countries from 1980 to 2020. Perfect. Koramboy, hi there. Good to see you here. Okay, so Dia's paraphrase is good. I'm going to take that and I'm going to add it to the screen, but the rest of you feel free to write your paraphrase and share it with me. I'll be able to give you feedback. Okay, so this is Dia's paraphrase. The line graph illustrates the average per capita consumption. Would it be average consumption of cheese per capita? I think it would be in that order. In 4 different countries from 1980 to 2020. Okay, so that's a good paraphrase. After that, we need to write our overview. Rather than me telling you what to do, I think it's better to just let you make your own mistakes. So I want you to attempt an overview, share it with me in the comments, and I will then, of course, be able to give you some feedback. So that's your next task for me there. Okay, so write the overview, share it with me in the comments, and then I'll have some feedback for you. I have Karamboy's paraphrase. The line graph shows how many kilograms of cheese was consumed by one English person from 1980 to 2020. So your punctuation has problems. You need to start with a capital letter, so capital T for the, and a full stop at the end. It's not consumed by one person. It's the average per person. So it's not that this isn't measuring, you know, we got one person from each of these countries and we saw how much cheese this one person ate. It's, you know, like, let's say there are 1 million people in the country and there were, you know, 1 million kilograms of cheese eaten in that country or consumed in that country. That would be 1 kilogram per person. So what they're doing is they're going per person, not for one person. So in your paraphrase, when you said here, consumed by one English person, it sounds like you're talking about one specific person, not the average in the country. And also then the question is about England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland, but you've only mentioned England. So those mistakes would definitely be problematic. So yeah, just be careful. You want to make sure that your paraphrase has the same meaning, and in this situation, it doesn't. So what would be better than changing the meaning would actually be just copying the phrase, copying the words from the question. And it's always that difficult balance. You know, you're trying to decide between like changing as many as you can, but not changing so much that the meaning is different. So you need to be careful with that. Okay, so Dia has an overview. Overall consumption figures in England and Scotland fell, while they rose in Wales and Northern Ireland. Okay. Again, that's a good start. Again, I'm just going to jump in and copy and paste that onto the screen here. Okay. So overall consumption figures, it's not consumption figures for. Let's just do this. The figures for England and Scotland fell. That's true. While they rose in Wales and Northern Ireland. Perfect. Okay. One thing I'm worried about though. So this is 16 words long. Now, when you think about the scores that the examiner will give you, there are kind of like 3 tiers of score according to the overview. So it's like no overview or an inappropriate overview, 5, an okay overview, 6, a suitable overview, 7. And then after that, band 8, band 9, that's got nothing to do with the overview. So what I worry about then is when you have a reasonably short overview, it's like, is that an okay overview band 6, or is that suitable for a 7? And how are you ensuring that yours is worthy of a band 7 rather than a band 6? So what I teach the students on my course is that we aim to write about 30 words in our overview. Now, you've included the most important information, which categories increased and which categories decreased. Definitely, that's what we want to start with. But in this situation, you've given the most important information and it's still quite short. So in this situation, I would like to include something extra. Very often I would just start with, which one started as the highest and which one ended as the highest. And if that's not long enough, maybe which one started as the lowest and which one ended as the lowest. So we're going to stay going until we reach about 30 words. At the moment, I'm just concerned that that's a little bit short. So as we can see, at the start, England was highest, and at the end, England was highest. It's not always the case, but for this question, England was always highest. So we could say something like, furthermore, throughout the entire period, England had the highest figure. Okay. So now we're kind of pushing close. It's probably a little bit less than 30, but you can see we're kind of getting closer to 30. So that's just to make 100% sure that I'm not going to get stuck in that band 6 for task achievement. I'm going to add a little bit more just to kind of get myself there. So it depends on the question. There will be times where just mentioning the highest and the low. Sorry, there will be times where just mentioning the increases and decreases will be enough, and that will be somewhere about 30 words long. So we wouldn't need to add this extra information. But in this situation, I would just worry that maybe we're not being descriptive enough for that band 7. Okay, so yeah, that's very good. And let's move on to the next point. What I'm going to do is let's just do one category at a time. Okay, so we're on the next part of the essay where we have to describe the specific details. I'm going to start with England. All right, so that's the next task for you guys. I want you to write a description of England. So that would be the first part of our body paragraph. So I'm going to have 2 body paragraphs. We're going to discuss England and Scotland in the first one because they both decreased. And then we're going to discuss Wales and Northern Ireland in the second one. So let's just start with the description of England. Write that, share it with me in the comments, and then I'll give you feedback on any mistakes that you're making. Okay, Reza. Hi, Reza. Overall, you need a comma after overall. Overall, it is evident that the most amount of cheese in each year consumed in England. So it would be, we don't say the most amount, that doesn't go together. So it would be the largest amount. The largest amount of cheese consumed in each year was in England. So you're kind of mixing up the sentence structures there. While Northern Ireland, you have a spelling mistake there. Northern Ireland had the lowest over most of the period. You see, and this is why I would recommend that when we're looking at a dynamic chart, when we're looking at a dynamic chart, that you would discuss the increases and decreases, because it can get complicated. Some questions, some dynamic questions, it's fine saying highest and lowest, but it's not very clear when you say Northern Ireland was the lowest for most of the period. So it's like, okay, well, which one was lowest when that wasn't the lowest? And when was it not the lowest? So it kind of opens up these kind of gaps in your description where it's like almost lowest most of the time. That's not enough for me to kind of understand what's happening. So I would always go with increases and decreases for a dynamic chart like this. And then if we need to add extra, we can, but start with the increases and decreases as the most important information. Dia, can we also describe the extent of the changes, say fell considerably or fell slightly? Yes, absolutely, you can do that. where I see students going wrong when they try to describe the range is that they'll apply a word to two categories that only applies to one. So they'll say like category A and B increased significantly, but it's like A was significant and B was slight. So very often that's the mistake that we see, where when people try to describe the extent, they still wanted to talk about the two that increase together, but you can't. If you're going not, you can't usually do that. So sometimes when you want to describe the extent, it will have to be A increased significantly while B increased slightly. You can't do them both together if they both don't have the same adjective, the same extent. So yes, absolutely you can. That's another way to extend your overview, saying the extent of the changes, but just make sure that it's 100% correct. Because if the description then is inaccurate, your task achievement score goes down. So yes, but be careful with it. Okay, and Coramboy, overall, the average amount of cheese consumption in England and Scotland declined over the given period, with England recording the highest figure of all time, while the reverse was true for Wales. Oh. Of the highest figure all the time, excuse me, I misread that, with England recording the highest figure all the time, while the reverse was true for Wales. So the reverse doesn't accurately mean Wales was the lowest. So that's actually not the clearest description. And the problem then as well is what you've said is England and Scotland decreased, whereas Wales was lowest. But if you're going to say these two decreased, you need to say the other two increased. Like you have to finish your description. So if you decide I'm going to talk about increases and decreases, but you only talk about two of the categories decreasing and you say nothing about the other two. So that's not the way to go about it. Say these two decreased and these two increased, not just what happened to half the categories. And the thing is, if you're talking about increases and decreases, that's one way to describe the categories. If you're talking about highest and lowest, that's another way to describe them. But you can't start with the increases and decreases, but only talk about half of that and then shift to the other side. It doesn't work like that. So when you start with increases and decreases, make sure that you describe all the categories in that way, not just a selection. Please let us write more. Yeah, go ahead. So we're looking for the description of England, Coramboy. Okay, so Dia has a description for England here. At the beginning of the period, the average person in England consumed approximately 115 kilograms of cheese. Over the following 20 years, this figure saw a slight drop to around 80. I don't know if that's slight. Is that slight? I feel like slight would be smaller than 25 kg. No, it's kind of it's a big proportion to call slight. So I would change that. And also we could be a bit more descriptive and say like it was quite steady. It was quite steady. So let me take what you've written and I'm going to adapt it. And I'm going to connect those sentences together as well. I mean, you've very nearly written. Do you know what? Let me just replace what we have here. Okay, so at the beginning of the period, the average person in England consumed approximately 115 kilograms of cheese. Great. Now, instead of having this in two sentences, let's just connect that as one. Okay, it doesn't take any extra work, or at least a very, very small amount of work. But you know, it's not that we have to rewrite all of those two sentences. We just put the word and now it's a longer structure. Okay, and I suppose it should be but because it decreased. But over the following 20 years, this figure saw a slight drop. So I'm going to say a marginal drop, or maybe a moderate drop to around 80 kilograms. Now, I want to say that it was quite steady. So let's say a moderate and relatively steady drop to around 80 kilograms. Okay, so what you'd written was already good, but I just want to make those little changes because if slight is considered as inaccurate, well, now you're looking at a band 6 for task achievement. We can just put those sentences together to make it more complex. And then just being more descriptive, saying relatively steady, because that explains then why did we only give 2 points on that chart? Why did we not mention anything in the middle? Well, because we didn't need to. It was quite steady. So I think that just further explains to the reader why we're only mentioning the start and the end. So that's kind of, more descriptive. Okay, so that's good. Reza and Koramboy, I see you've shared some writing about England with me already, but let me just move you on to the next one before I look at it. So next, let's look at Scotland. Write a description of Scotland. Again, share it with me in the comments and I'll have some feedback for you. Okay, so Reza, here's your description of England. In 1980, around 110 kg, yep, but it would have to be of cheese. Around 110 kg of cheese was consumed in England, which was significantly higher than Scotland and Wales at approximately 80. So you would have to say which were at approximately 80 kg and just below 50 kg respectively. Now, we don't want to do that because you were talking about England and now you're giving me data for Scotland and Wales. So are we describing England or are we describing 1980? And the problem then is we don't need to mention the same years for every category. So for England, like we just saw with Daya's writing, we just mentioned 1980 and 2020. But when we're talking about Scotland, we're definitely going to mention 1990 as well because we have that peak. So there's no real need to discuss them together, because if we do, then we're going to be mentioning different years for different ones, and it becomes a bit less clear. So no, I wouldn't mention the data for Scotland and Wales in the middle of my description of England, and also I wouldn't just mention all the data for 1980 and then all the data for 1990 and all the data for 2000, because that's excessive and that will reduce your task achievement score as well. They want you to mention the key features, not mention every piece of data for every year, for every category. So yeah, we want to avoid that. Okay, so Koramboy, the only figure that exhibited a continuous decline was England in terms of cheese consumption. No, because it's not in terms of cheese consumption. Cheese consumption is the only thing we're talking about. So was England, and just delete in terms of cheese consumption, delete that bit. Decreasing from around 110 to 85 kg. We need the unit, that's important. Despite the decrease, or it would be despite this decrease, the one that you've just mentioned, despite this decrease, the figure for England was by far the highest over the period. It wasn't by far the highest. I mean, it was only a little bit higher than the yellow one, than Wales at the end. It was only a little bit higher than Scotland. So that's inaccurate. You can say it was the highest, but not it was by far the highest. So be careful with that as well. You want to make sure your descriptions are accurate. By 1990, the figure for England remained relatively at the beginning level. Oh, and you see, no, what you want to do, Reza, describe one category at a time, okay? And only choose the points based on the shape of the line. So when we say England is a straight line, mentioning the start and the end is enough, and then there's nothing else really important in the middle because it's straight. But when we look at Scotland, it went from here up to here and then down. So mentioning the start and the end is always going to be important. But for Scotland, we have to mention this point as well so that they know it went up and then it went down. But when it's a straight line, we wouldn't mention all of the years for all of the categories. You have to describe based on the shape of the line, you choose the important points. So like the blue line is straight, so just the start and the end is fine. For the red one, if we only included the start and the end, that wouldn't really be very clear. Like, let me see, how do I, like if we just mentioned the first and the last point for red, the reader would think that that's what it looked like. So if we only mention 1980 and 1990, that's what the reader would imagine. But if we include this one and this one and this one, well, then the reader's going to imagine, okay, it went from the first one to the second one and it went from the second one to the third one. I mean, it's not perfectly accurate, but it's quite close. So no, don't go year by year. Don't include all the years. Just include the important years based on the shape of the line. Yeah. Okay, Coramboy. After reaching a peak of approximately 102 kg, the average amount of cheese consumption in Scotland dropped significantly, falling to roughly 55 kilograms. So a few problems here. You haven't mentioned the first year. So you haven't told me where was it in 1980. So now for the reader, they would never, you haven't given them that information, so they won't know. So you have to give the first year always. Every category will always have to give the first year. It reached a peak of approximately 102 kg. When? When did that happen? So you need to say, for every point on the chart, like if you want to say 102 kg, what, hang on now a second. If you want to say 102 kg, the reader will go, okay, so it was here. When? You need to say when. So all I know is that it was along this line sometime. But when you say in 1990, I go, okay, here. So I can see where this line it connects with this line. That's how I know to put an X here. That's how I know what that point is. So any point on the chart that you want to talk about, you have to give the data from the y-axis and the data from the x-axis. If you only give one of those pieces of information, that doesn't mean anything. It's where those two connect on the graph. That's what that means. So if you say it reached a peak of 105, but you don't say when, that doesn't mean anything. Or a peak of 102, but you don't say when, that doesn't mean anything. So for every point, you have to give the number of kgs and the year you're talking about, but also you have to mention the first year for every category. Always mention the first, always mention the last. And it's the ones from the middle that we need to make a decision on. Some of them we will, some of them we won't. Similarly, Scotland's figure for cheese consumption initially rose from 80 to 100 kilograms in the first 10 years, before falling considerably to, by 35 kilograms by 80. So we've gone 100, 70, 65. Is that right? Yep, that's good. Okay, so again, let me just take this one. I'll copy it in. And we'll make a few little changes here as well. So the first thing I'm concerned about when I look at this one is the word similarly. What is similar? Why are we using the word similarly? Like what is similar to what? Scotland is similar to England because it rose from 80 to 100. Well, no, that's not similar. That's different. That's not what happened in England. So the word similarly here, we're saying that something is similar, but what is similar? What are we trying to highlight with that word? So that's unclear. So that's obviously, that's not appropriate. So I'm going to remove that. Scotland's figure for cheese consumption initially rose from 80 to 100. I want to be more accurate than that. So So let's say from roughly 80 to 100, but you can see it's not exactly 100. It's a little bit over 100. From roughly 80 to slightly above 100 kilograms in the first 10 years. Perfect. Before falling considerably by 35 kilograms in 2020. If I want to use by 2020, I'd have to use past perfect. So let's not overcomplicate it here. Before falling considerably by 35 kg in 2020. Is that correct? I'm not sure if it is. So let's make it easier. Let's say 105. So you're going to say to 70. But it's not, is it? My math is getting me here. So we're saying 105 minus 35 is 70. So if it was 70, then it would have to be up here, right? 70 would be slightly under it because that one there is 75. So 70, I guess, would be around here. So that's not true. Didn't fall by 35. So that's not going to work. So no, definitely we need to change that. We don't have to do math. There's no reason for us to do the math to figure out what we want to say. Let's just say it fell to, I don't know, like about 60 kilograms in 2020. Okay, so instead of trying to use math and forcing ourselves to make mistakes, let's just say what the data is. Let's make it easier for ourselves. Okay, so that's our first body paragraph finished. We're going to have to move on to the next one. So next in line would be Wales. So that's your next task for me. Write a description of Wales, as usual, share it, and then I'll have some feedback for you guys. Sir, but we lost the chance of making comparisons. No, I mean, everything we've written is a comparison. So when I say Scotland's figure for cheese consumption initially rose from roughly 80 to 105 kilograms in the first 10 years, I'm comparing the figure for Scotland at the start with the figure for Scotland after 10 years. That's a comparison. Everything we're writing is a comparison. So the types of comparisons that you're making where you're going year by year, like that is not what we need. That's not the type of comparison that the test requires. So no, go category by category. It'll be easier for you to write, and it will be easier for the reader to understand. Can we write by far the most popular in writing task 1? You can, but not for this question. But like, let's say if we had a question going like, you know, the percentages of people who like football most. Like in one country, this is the percentage of people whose favorite sport is football. This is the percentage of people whose favorite sport is tennis or whatever. Like in that situation, yeah, you could talk about which one was most popular because it's the one that people like most. And then obviously if one percentage was way higher than the others, then to say by far the most popular is suitable. In this particular question, I don't know how you would squeeze that into the essay. I think it probably wouldn't be appropriate. But there's nothing wrong with that phrase that you've suggested. Just make sure that it suits the question. It suits what's being discussed. Okay, so when you're ready there, share your descriptions of Wales. Okay, so Dia has a description here. By comparison, the amount of cheese eaten in Wales had a gradual increase from just under 50 kilograms in 1980 to around 75 kilograms in 2010, after which it leveled off toward the end of the period. When you look at this chart, like when we decide, you're correct, we need to include an extra year. So you've included this one, and this one. But what I would be looking out for would be obviously the start and the end. Yes, always we have to include the start and the end. But the choices really are we going to include this one or are we going to include this one? For me, the bigger bend would be more significant than the smaller bend. So like when making that decision, if you've one bend is like this size and then another bend is this size, the bigger one is going to be more significant, more important. And I think like that's why, like when we were looking at Scotland, it was very obviously we wanted to mention 1990 because that was the biggest one. So then when we're describing the yellow line, when we're describing Wales, I would argue that the bigger one is going to be more important than the smaller one. So for me, including 1990 would be a better option than including 2010. Okay. This time you said by comparison it makes sense because the last one decreased and this one increased. Whereas with the previous description, when you said similarly, there wasn't anything similar. At least you weren't highlighting anything similar. By contrast, starting at nearly 47 kg, the average cheese consumption in Wales increased substantially, climbing to slightly over 77 kg in 2010 and recording the second highest figure. Rather than saying and recording, let's maybe say which was the second highest figure at the end. Make it clear that that's when we're talking about. So again, you always want to make it really, really clear. When was it? In what year are you describing? Okay, so let me take that and I'm going to add, like I said, I want to include another year here. I think just mentioning the start and the end is a little bit short for this one. So let's include 1990 as well. So I'm going to take what you've written there, Coramboy. We'll work with this and I'll make the necessary changes. Let's say, by contrast, after starting at nearly 75 kg, the average cheese consumption in Wales increased substantially to, let's say, about, I don't know, what is that? Halfway between 50 and 75, maybe like 65, to about 65 kg in 1990 before climbing to slightly over 77. We would say slightly over 75 because 75 is the line, or about 77, but not slightly over 77. When we're saying slightly over, it's because that's the marking on the chart. So there's a line saying 75. It's one of the markings. So I would say more likely climbing to slightly over that in 2020, which was the second highest figure in that year, or in the end, or whatever you want. Okay. So that leaves us with one more. We just have Northern Ireland left. So let me get you guys started on that, and then I'll look at any writing that I haven't already discussed. Okay. So write a description of Northern Ireland, just like before. Share it with me in the comments, and then I'll have some feedback for you. Okay, so Reza, Wales figure began at just below 50, and after a gradual increase, you need an article, and then you need a comma. And after a gradual increase, it's at about just above 70. Reached just above 70. So these are grammar mistakes you're making here. In 2010. Well, it was just above 75. So that data is inaccurate. So you want to be careful. You want to be careful with that. Inaccurate data will give you a band 6 or lower. And its upward trend maintained its momentum by 2020. That's unclear. Its upward trend maintained its momentum. So what you would want to say is it stayed roughly the same for the rest of the period. But the way you've described it, the language, the vocab there would reduce the accuracy of that description. And like we already discussed, you would probably want to include 1990 rather than 2010 because it's a bigger turn. I guess, I mean, if you thought you had enough time, you could probably mention 1990 and 2010. But if we're only going to choose one, I would favor 1990 over 2010. Okay. Dia, you're very welcome. My pleasure. Okay, so we just have that one. We just have that one category left, Northern Ireland. Okay, I'll just wait one more minute. If you guys don't have your descriptions of Northern Ireland finished in another minute, I'll just show you a sample that I've written. Okay, Cramboy. The figure for Northern Ireland experienced the most noticeable growth. Is that correct? Yeah, definitely, that's correct. Oh, sorry, I've clicked on the wrong one. Growth rising from around 12 kg in the initial year to about 58 kg in 2020, with the Northern Ireland overtaking that of Scotland at the end. So again, you need a full stop at the end of the sentence. So you were already talking about Northern Ireland. So here, when you said with Northern Ireland overtaking that of Scotland, we wouldn't do that, because for your coherence and cohesion score, like referencing, you need to reference the thing that you're already talking about, like use a pronoun or something. So let me show you how we would do that. So let me just grab that and we'll put it on the screen here. Okay, so the figure for Northern Ireland experienced the most noticeable growth, fine, rising from around 12 kg in the initial year to about 58 kg in 2020. Okay. Maybe just overtaking, because we're already talking about Northern Ireland, overtaking Scotland. You'd say that of, but like the figure for Scotland, or just overtaking Scotland at the end. That's fine. Do we want to include an extra year? I mean, we could include 2010 as well. Let's not. Let's say that's enough. Okay. So that was our second body paragraph. This was our first. So just give me a moment. I'm going to try and get it all on the screen here at the same time. And this was our first paragraph where we had our paraphrase and our overview. So let me just see. Obviously, I'm going to have to make it a lot smaller. But let me just try and get it all on the screen together, so you can get a kind of better feel for what we're looking at. All right, so I need to try and squeeze it in here. Okay. Okay, so that's obviously going to be quite small. I'm not sure if you can read that on the screen. Let me just jump in here. See, am I in the way? I'm in the way as well, so that's not going to help. Okay, so that'll just give you an idea there of what that essay would look like. Might be a little bit short. I would potentially include 2010 for Northern Ireland as well. I don't think it's 100% essential, but I think that would give us a fairly good look at what that would look like. Right, so let me see what comments we have left here. So Dia says, Northern Ireland's figure stood at roughly 10 kgs in 1980. Okay. After which it saw a substantial rise to 65 kg at the end. Yep, that's fine. Although it remained as the lowest cheese consumer, it managed to rank third in cheese consumption. No. Because you said it remained as the lowest, so that has to be the lowest. So you can't say it remained as the lowest and became the third lowest, because then you're saying it was the fourth lowest and the third lowest at the same time. So no. And then at this one here, you said ranked third in cheese consumption. Again, when are you talking about? So there are 5 years on the chart. Which one of those years are you discussing? So it was unclear, and you didn't say when. So it was unclear for more than one reason. Okay, so I believe that's all we have time for today. I'll be back with another live stream next week. And yeah, if any of you guys need one-on-one support, please reach out and I'll be able to help you with that. And yeah, so that's it for now. Take care.